IT management was briefly discussed at our hearing in February, today's hearing will allow the committee to receive more detailed information on what the library is doing to improve their management of the library's IT systems. The Library of Congress serves many different constituencies and many different capacities. The 11-month audit resulted in 6 broad functions, including a Chief Information Officer. Since GAO released its report, the library has worked to address these recommendations. To date, 5 recommendations have been fully implemented to GAO's satisfaction. For example, in 2015, the library appointed Mr. Barton as the new Chief Information Officer. Later in 2016, Dr. Hayden issued a memorandum directing all library technology activities be centrally coordinated through the Office of the Chief Information Officer and be approved by the library's Chief Information Officer. And most recently, the library completed its IT strategic plan. Finally, the library has developed and implemented a number of policies and processes to review IT investments as well as inventory IT systems. According to GAO, the library has committed to closing another 22 recommendations by the end of this year, a very ambitious goal. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today on these efforts, including understanding what support will be available. For example, there are many things that we'll look at today with the witnesses. And as we look at how things have gone, I also want to point out a couple of other things before we hear from Ms. Lofton. You know, the Library of Congress serves as the largest library in the world, maintaining much more than 164 million items in its collections. It houses a copyright office, which registered more than 414,000 copyright claims in fiscal year 2016. The library is also home to the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, which, according to the library, in fiscal year 2016, provided 22 million copies of Braille and recorded books and magazines to more than 800,000 individuals. These are just a few of the library's roles and the constituencies that they serve. As technology has advanced, the library's constituencies have changed the way that they consume information. As a result, it has had to modernize its systems, evolving its IT systems and processes to meet the needs of its constituencies in a digital world. However, these changes have not come without management challenges. As far back as 1996, the library had issues managing its IT systems, and these is a part of our history. And you look at what's happened in the past as we've gone through these things, and we want to come to a point where we address these challenges and these recommendations that have been made. So I would now like to recognize my colleague, Zoe Lofton, the gentlelady from California, for the purpose of providing an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brady was unable to be here this morning, so I'm happy to give as well if we don't have an adequate IT system. And as we know, we've had deficiencies there for a long time. The appointment of Mr. Barton has been a huge important step forward. We're appreciative of that. The clearly defined roles and responsibilities is just essential if we're going to move forward successfully in the IT area. It's my understanding that of the 31 recommendations made by the GAO, all are either on schedule or ahead of schedule or have been completed, which is really fabulous. The library, I think, has submitted their budget request for fiscal year 18, and in it they've requested increases to their funding to support the continued IT modernization, and I think we all need to support this request. It's an investment in our future. The library can't be expected to keep pace with rapid technological changes if they're not resourced to do so. As I say, the library is a world-class cultural institution. It's something we're proud of. It's one of the premier visitor attractions in this beautiful city, but the behind-the-scene work of the IT people is essential. So thank you, witnesses. Thank you, Dr. Hayden, for your terrific leadership in this part of the library and every other. It's a pleasure to see you again. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I know there are no other hearings commanding attention on the Hill today, so I will yield back.
Well, as evidenced by the incredible number of media representatives that are here to cover this hearing, that's a great observation, Ms. Lofton. The gentlelady yields back. Anyone else, any other member care to make any opening statements?
Mr. Chair, but I just wanted to welcome back to the committee Dr. Hayden as the only representative of the Free State here. I want to just commend Dr. Hayden on her leadership and just reemphasize how proud everybody is in Maryland of what you're doing in the Library of Congress. And of course, we had your leadership at the Enoch Pratt Library in Baltimore, so I want to associate myself with the remarks of Ms. Lofgren and welcome you back.
Gentleman yields back. I'd now like to introduce our witnesses. Dr. Carla Hayden was sworn in as the 14th Librarian of Congress on September 14th, 2016. Her appointment to this position also marked the first time in our nation's library that we have had a woman and an African American. Dr. Hayden is a librarian's librarian, dedicating her entire career to pursuing the accessibility of libraries in communities. In her short time leading the library, Dr. Hayden has already demonstrated her commitment to continuing the tradition of collecting, preserving, and making available a vast collection of educational resources and protecting those collections for future generations. The committee welcomes you back, Dr. Hayden. Mr. Bernard Bud Barton was named the library's Chief Information Officer on September the 8th, 2015. In his capacity as CIO, Mr. Barton serves as the primary advisor to the librarian on all information technology matters, as well as a voting member of the library's executive committee. Prior to his service at the library, Mr. Barton was the Deputy Administrator and Chief Information Officer of the Defense Technical Information Center. Welcome to you, Mr. Barton. Our final witness is Mr. Kurt Hyde. Mr. Hyde is the current Inspector General for the Library of Congress. As the IG, Mr. Hyde is responsible for assessing the library's operations. Prior to serving as the library's IG, Mr. Hyde served as the Deputy Inspector General for Audit and Evaluations at the Special Inspector General for Troubled Asset Relief Program. Sounds a lot like TARP. Welcome, Mr. Hyde. And again, we thank each of you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing your testimony. And the chair will now recognize for 5 minutes Dr. Carla Hayden for the purposes of an opening statement. Dr. Hayden.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Harper and members of the committee, and thank you for inviting me to provide testimony on information technology at the Library of Congress. I want to express my gratitude for the support of this committee and, in fact, the entire Congress gives to the library. The library's vision is to provide excellent service to members of Congress while providing free and equal access to the public. When I envision the future of this great institution, I see it growing in stature, and as its resources are readily available for more people online, users will not have to be in Washington, D.C. to access the library's vast resources and collections. Our hope is that everyone, everywhere, will have a sense of ownership and pride in this national treasure. And now, nearly 9 months into my tenure, I continually believe and am inspired by the breadth and depth of the library's collections and the expertise and commitment to public service by its staff. The library continues to focus, with my direction, in earnest on its information technology management challenges. The Government Accountability Office, GAO, delivered reports to the library in 2015 that cited the need to improve the institution's overall IT planning, management, and operations. The Library Inspector General also delivered reports on IT investment management and systems development. Together, these reports offered dozens of specific, helpful policy and operational recommendations to the library. and we welcome these examinations and especially the constructive guidance they provide. That knowledge and guidance has proven critical to developing the dynamic state-of-the-industry IT infrastructure and management the library so sorely needs. In the months since I took office, to better support these priorities, we have taken important steps to strengthen management and oversight within existing resources. In November, I addressed the need to maximize value from the library's investment in technology by directing that all technology activities be centrally coordinated through the Office of the Chief Information Officer and approved by Mr. Bud Barton, who now reports directly to me. I have weekly meetings with Mr. Barton, who shares regular updates on the progress being made in not only centralization, but on the entire progress of IT modernization. IT centralization is well underway, and IT investment planning is now monitored and coordinated library-wide. The enhancements in the IT infrastructure also allow us to increase visibility and accessibility of the library and its programming to all of your constituents around the country, and to support modern applications for programs such as the Veterans History Project mobile application. More and more events are being live streamed to schools and public libraries across the nation, and school children and teens from various states are able to watch, listen, and even ask questions to high-profile writers and authors. Chairman Harper and members of the committee, the library is both America's first federal cultural institution and part of the innovative infrastructure of America. I thank you again for supporting the library, and I would like to now introduce and have Mr. Bud Barton and Inspector General Kurt Hyde give you more details about the progress we've made.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden, and we appreciate your testimony and look forward to hearing more from you. At this time, the chair will recognize Mr. Bud Barton for 5 minutes for the purpose of an opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Harper and members of the committee. I am honored and humbled to appear before this committee this morning representing the Library of Congress as its Chief Information Officer. I would like to start by thanking each of you for your support of the library and of our IT modernization efforts. In my short time at the library, I have become an admirer of our mission and work, and I'm devoted to improving it. My optimism is due in no small part to the dedicated and committed staff of the library, whose first priority is to provide superior customer service for the Congress and for the American people. I'll focus today on steps we are taking to ensure that priority is achieved. As you know, the library is working to implement recommendations from the Government Accountability Office and the library's Inspector General regarding IT. I take their recommendations very seriously and am confident that we will be successful in addressing these concerns, resulting in highly capable, agile, and customer-oriented IT services for the Library of Congress and its customers. So far, we have closed 51 of 74 non-public GAO recommendations and 5 of the 31 public recommendations, and we're making steady progress, as noted earlier, on the others. Since my appointment in September of 2015, the library has made important changes at the leadership level to ensure that I have the authority to implement positive change. The librarian recently directed all library technology activities be centrally coordinated through the Office of the CIO. In implementing this directive, the library has promulgated internal regulations, established roles and responsibilities, and other policies to ensure effective and efficient IT management. Our plan for centralization follows current industry best practices for streamlining IT governance, investments, and resources. We recently updated the library-wide IT strategic plan to incorporate feedback from the Government Accountability Office and the library's IT steering and executive committees. In addition, I am taking the lead on the library's digital strategy effort with full support and participation from my colleagues. The digital strategy will address the library's vision for using technology to fulfill our mission. We continue to improve the library's IT investment processes. For FY18, we are incorporating technology business management principles into our investment cycle. The objective is to improve transparency, accountability, and IT value delivery to meet business and mission goals. Thanks to Congress's multi-year commitment to the library's data center migration, we are aggressively modernizing to state-of-the-art off-site hosting environments that will provide significant improvements in reliability, allow for scalability, and enable greater focus on business applications across the library. As confidential consultants to the Congress, administrator of the National Copyright System, and stewards of the nation's cultural history, the library is well aware of the need to ensure security of the digital content in our care. Securing IT systems requires proactive monitoring, testing, incident management, as well as anticipation of future cyber-based threats. We have created a dedicated information security office staffed with true cybersecurity professionals to ensure that the library IT systems are secure. We received funding during our FY17 request to support this effort and to implement multi-factor authentication to further protect the library's network. We are also active participants in the Legislative Branch Cybersecurity Working Group, through which we are able to share threat information knowledge about new technologies to improve the legislative branch security posture. While working to improve enterprise infrastructure and processes, we continue to work with the library service units on their specific systems and applications. These efforts will help ensure that service units are able to rely upon a stable IT infrastructure to meet their business needs, and that the library has an actionable roadmap to enable patrons to access services and information seamlessly as possible. Congress.gov, the official website for U.S. federal legislative information, has recently experienced record usage, serving millions of unique visitors each month. LOC.gov pages have recently been redesigned to emphasize the library's unparalleled collections to highlight the library's events, exhibits, and staff expertise. This is the first step in realizing the librarian's goal for expanding discovery and use of the fantastic resources available to all through the library. In closing, the progress we have made over the last 18 months, along with my commitment to continuous improvement moving forward, has set a foundation for outstanding IT service to the Congress and the American people. I appreciate this committee's support, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. The chair will now recognize Mr. Hyde for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Great, thank you. Chairman Harper and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the progress the Library of Congress has made in addressing its IT deficiencies, challenges, and the work of the OIG in this area. Since 2011, our semi-annual reports to Congress have consistently identified IT infrastructure as a top management challenge for the library. I have been the IG at the library since the summer of 2014. Our work over this time has emphasized that a robust strategic plan is essential to the library's ability to efficiently and effectively fulfill its mission and be nimble to meet changing customer demands. We all recognize that an agency of the magnitude and importance of the library, whose very essence involves collecting and conveying information, cannot succeed in the information age without a highly functioning and leading-edge digital infrastructure. Changes at the senior-most levels of both library leadership and IT management have resulted in momentum towards developing the foundation for a stable infrastructure. In our 2009 report on IT strategic planning, we found significant issues with the library's strategic planning process, customer service problems, IT investments not linked to the strategic plan, and an organizational structure that did not foster good IT governance. In 2015, both GAO and my office found similar IT management issues as identified in 2009. For example, as a consequence of not having a strong strategic plan, the library's e-deposit program, which is the library's program to collect electronic works, was not effectively implemented. In our 2015 report, we identified strategic planning, leadership, and governance issues as causes for this. Since 2015, 3 significant changes have occurred. First, the previous librarian disbanded the old structure and organizationally created an office of the Chief Information Officer. Secondly, management hired a qualified CIO to lead the library's IT reforms. and Mr. Barton has the experience and technical qualifications required for this position. And third, Dr. Hayden, as a new librarian, shifted the lines of reporting so that the CIO now reports directly to her. In taking these actions, the library complied with longstanding government requirements and opened the door for the CIO to first become more strategically prepared and secondly, to dramatically change how IT provides services. The first will take time, and the second requires a laser focus on day-to-day operations, and the CIO is making good headway in this area. As we have advised the librarian and the CIO, a concurrent task will be to staff the CIO's office with the knowledge, skills, and abilities critical to achieving these goals, as well as to contract out for services to temporarily fill the critical gaps. For sure, it will be a challenge to do this and steady the ship at the same time. Fortunately, the CIO has a very effective deputy and has brought on board some other critical technical executives. The CIO and his staff have over 100 audit recommendations that will take time to adequately address. Our focus at this point is to look at implementation and not create additional recommendations at the macro level. I want to get back to strategic planning for a moment because it is the crux of what will make or break the library's success in the digital age. As we've said in our reports, the library does not have a strong track record in implementing its enterprise-wide strategic plan. The imperative for the librarian and other library executives is to put together a strategic plan and implement it in a deliberate and timely manner. This is no easy task. Once executed, it will require topmost executives to constantly monitor the various units' implementation and will require changes in the library's governance and reporting. The library has taken the steps of hiring a strategic planning officer to help implement this. The plan's key components must include a comprehensive digital services strategy and an understanding of its customer. Presently, the library has neither. The library and its CIO need a coherent, overarching strategy that considers both interconnectivity and customers' needs. Such a strategy must have a good grounding in what that strategy needs to look and feel like from a customer's perspective, be it a member of Congress receiving a CRS report, e-commerce solutions for copyright, or pushing research out and making it available to the research community. Great challenges lie ahead for the library. Senior management's commitment to change and the positive movement we have seen in recent years makes us hopeful that the library is on the right course. Thank you for the opportunity to address this committee, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. We appreciate each of you giving us your testimony, and we'll look forward to questions now. And we all know how the timing device works, so I'm going to recognize myself now for 5 minutes for questions. First question I have, really, Mr. Hyde, you just mentioned that the Library of Congress had hired someone to do the strategic planning. Who is that person?
That is Diane Houghton.
Okay.
And she has extensive experience in that area. She has started up a risk management process, as well as is assisting and helping the librarian implement the envisioning process that she's.
And as the IG, are you satisfied then with her qualifications and with the effort she thus far is making?
I am. She is very qualified. I think the one of the things that you had mentioned in your opening statement was, is there necessary support available? And I think that the library, and we've talked about this with both the librarian and the CIO, is that they need to hire contract support for this. They need to bring in a qualified firm to do help them with the digital services strategy as well as an enterprise-wide strategy.
Okay. Now, I think it's pretty ambitious, obviously, and that's good, trying to close these recommendations. And what are the challenges or barriers or opportunities, perhaps, that your office anticipates for the library to close each of the remaining 26 recommendations?
I think it's time. When the CIO first came on board, as well as before the new librarian came on board, I met with the then chief of staff, who's now the Robert Newland, who's now the deputy librarian, and I said, these are not quick fixes. These are 3 to 5 years it'll take to implement many of these recommendations. and just, do it at deliberate speed and grouping them in a very logical way.
Okay, so the report was that there would be an attempt to close out 22 of those 26 remaining before the end of this year. Is that likely, or are these ones that can be done in that period of time?
Well, I think the GAO recommendations, I think they've been working with GAO on a regular basis, weekly meeting with GAO to close those. And some of these can be closed relatively quickly, and that's like putting in the right structure.
Sure. And so if that happens, and if my math doesn't fail me, there are 26 left, we do 22 of them by the end of the year. That leaves 4 of the recommendations to be completed. And are those ones that you're saying would take years to do?
For ours, I think that you have the strategic planning element, the cost controls that are needed, the identification of the right infrastructure, the server infrastructure that's needed, cloud decisions, for example, that would take longer, but the others can be relatively quickly.
Okay, Mr. Barton, if I could ask you, as we look at this, would you talk about your plans to address those remaining GAO recommendations? And see, your testimony highlights changes the library is making, but talk about the steps the library is making to fulfill those recommendations. Just give us some specifics there.
Yes, sir. The Deputy CIO and GAO counterpart meet on a weekly basis to discuss the outstanding GAO recommendations.
Right.
We are very confident that the target dates that we have set, we will meet, although I would like to say that the primary goal from my perspective is not just to close the recommendations. The recommendations are great and they're a good roadmap. My intention is that we take those recommendations and view them as an opportunity to get ahead of future issues, right? So this is not a check the box, get the recommendations closed issue that I'm trying to address. It really is setting the library up for success in the future, not just to get the
So not necessarily to check the box and say it's done, but to make sure you've done that, but you continue for the future to make sure that we don't get into another situation with many recommendations that need to be done.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. And I realize my time is almost up, so at this point, I will now recognize the lady from California, Ms. Lofton, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barton, after you were hired and Mr. Mao became the acting librarian, you both started working together in redefining the office of the CIO and consolidating IT. Were there particular units or personalities that were opposed to some of your proposed modernization and centralization plans?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. Oppose may be a stronger word than I would use. Many of the service units have some concerns. They, and rightfully so, are very mission-focused.
Right.
And the library's track record on supporting those missions is mixed. I have committed to each of the service units that they will not experience a degradation in IT services as we implement this centralization, and that we will allow them to spend more of their time on their mission-oriented IT needs and less time on the general day-to-day IT requirements that any organization has, email and word processing.
So is it your view at this point that basically everybody's on board with the plan?
Yes, ma'am. It is my view, and I have regular meetings with each of the service unit heads, and each one of them has expressed a desire to make this be successful. Still remaining concerns that we are addressing on a weekly basis.
That's great news. In your testimony, you indicated that you're working with the Copyright Office to rework their IT modernization plan. That's really important to my district. We have large software and small software companies that rely on the Copyright Office and are desperate that the modernization has not yet been accomplished. The first version of the plan failed to consider the work being done in the library, as I understand it. Was that a mistake?
I think it missed an opportunity to take advantage of existing IT infrastructure and the ability for focusing specifically on mission requirements as opposed to infrastructure requirements.
So at this point, it's my understanding that the Copyright Office's modernization plan will leverage and coordinate with the library's organization-wide strategic plan. Will that save money compared to the other plan?
I anticipate that it will. I would like to say that we are having weekly meetings with the Copyright Office now to discuss how we are going to modernize their actual modernization plan. That is being very productive.
Good.
We are making good progress.
Is it going to save time, do you think?
I would be very surprised if it did not save time.
Good. What kind of impact, if any, does not having a permanent register have on the progress that you're making?
It would be hard for me to judge that.
Okay.
But I would say that the current register and I.
The acting register? Yeah.
Twice a month, and we are having very detailed discussion about her needs and how we can use IT at the library to meet those needs. I feel that as long as she feels empowered to make decisions, that we will be successful going forward.
Okay.
That would be a question.
Okay. Well, maybe I should ask Dr. Hayden. It was my understanding that your plan was to post the Register of Copyrights opening on the USA Jobs site last April with a plan to hire in 60 days, but I don't think the opening was ever posted. What caused the delay in hiring the register, and what kind of impact does not having an appointed register have, do you think, on the Copyrights Office to ability to modernize? It's very important that that proceed.
The library has worked directly with Congress on the register position, and at this point, the search and the process for having a permanent register has been suspended. And in the
Because of the bill that
interim,
passed the House?
it's a congressional decision. And in the interim, we have worked, and I want to say and echo what Mr. Barton said about working with the acting register on making sure that we continue the momentum on modernizing the office and the processes. That's critical, and that needs to happen regardless. And so we've taken the lead basically on making sure that that continues while we wait for Congress to make a decision on the action.
Well, my time is up, but I'm glad to hear that we're just proceeding and making the decisions in the absence. The fact that I think the bill was a mistake, as I said publicly, but the fact that it passed the House doesn't mean anything. I mean, most of the bills we send to the Senate die there, so I'm hoping that we don't mess up the modernization effort in that key element of the library, and I'm very reassured by your comments,
Thank you.
Dr. Hayden, and I yield back.
Thank you. I completely agree with my colleague. Many things we pass just do die in the Senate. But I do want to say thank you to Dr. Hayden, and I appreciated your responses to Ms. Lofgren's questions, especially about respecting what may or may not happen in this institution. Your willingness to work with us here in this committee on issues that are related to infrastructure, inventory, IT today, and also your willingness to work with us on issues that may have jurisdiction in other committees that members may serve on. Has been a breath of fresh air for me personally. It's been great to get to know you. I look forward to continuing to work with you to address some issues that are in my district that you're very familiar with because of your time spent in my district too. So thank you very much for your responses. I'm going to actually not ask you any questions. I'm going to go to Mr. Hyde instead. But thank you, Dr. Hayden. Mr. Hyde, I think you're probably more appropriate to answer the questions that I have. It's really about inventory. Before you can set a strategic plan to continue to buy and upgrade new products, I guess we have to make sure that we have an inventory of the products that were already purchased and used and may or may not still exist within the library to make sure we've got it right. That's something that I think many member offices forget to really truly manage, and there comes a time when they have to get their inventory straight too. You have much more and a much larger inventory than each of us do as members of Congress. But that's why we in the House, and this committee in particular, has really tried to strive to put together a ledge branch-wide purchasing operation so that institutions like yours that have larger facilities, larger needs, can also take advantage of better systems. So I want to ask you, Mr. Hyde, how would you assess the state of inventory management and capacity planning at the library right now?
I think there's two components to that. One is from an IT perspective, and that I think that the CIO's office is getting their arms around. That was one of the issues that GAO brought up and that we brought up a while ago. And
So that GAO, if you don't mind me interrupting, had identified 18,000 computers, and you really only had physically about 6,500?
Right, and Mr. Barton can answer the specifics on this, but I think that that's correct. There's a challenge between the record keeping and the actual inventory and what things have been that are old and not used and not needed anymore. And I think that that's what was the challenge of the library.
Does your disposed inventory go to the GSA?
No, I think there's I don't know that answer. I can get that to you, but I think there's flexibility in what they can do with the inventory.
Okay, what steps has the library taken to more accurately account for the IT resources?
Right, well, he has a team. As a matter of fact, they've been recently just talking to me about different ways to efficiently record that inventory, and so they are taking action, and they're trying to get their arms around it, as you know, and also determining the smaller pieces. Do we really spend our time on the smaller pieces versus the larger elements? And they are working towards it.
Well, Mr. Barton, do the current regulations and processes for acquisition management allow your office to acquire the needed IT services effectively and easily?
Easily would be a matter of.
Well, nothing's ever
Right.
easy in acquisition, unfortunately.
Right, exactly. So we have not had any circumstances where we have not been able to get the items or services, equipment that we need. There are always room for improvement in those types of processes, but I am satisfied with the current acquisition process with the library.
To what extent will the GAO recommendations improve or hinder that effectiveness?
There have been several suggestions and implemented suggestions from the GAO, primarily regarding contract phrasing, required clauses within contracts, dealing with security, dealing with the ownership of data or property of the government whenever we enter into contracts. So that was a very practical help from the audits.
All right, my time's running out, so I got a couple of quick questions to ask you, Mr. Barton. How soon do you anticipate closing recommendations related to this area in the GAO study?
I will have to take that for the record, sir, but we do expect that we'll be closing the vast majority by the end of this calendar year.
Okay, how are you using the legislative branch-wide acquisition process?
That's a very good question. We are using ledge branch-wide acquisition capabilities whenever it's possible and makes sense for us. In fact, most of the contracts that we are writing ourselves these days are open for the rest of the legislative branch to use.
Well, thank you. My time's expired, and I have to go to another hearing, so Mr. Loudermilk is going to take over and ask his questions from here. Thank you very much.
you.
I apologize for the delay with the change there. It was unexpected, but I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Barton, want to talk, continue the conversation we're having about the GAO report, which was, I guess, published in March of 2015. Is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically on the 10 items or recommendations made regarding information security, our management, the information security management. To date, from what it appears, is only one of the 10 recommendations has been completed. Is that correct?
Of the public recommendations, yes, sir.
Okay. And 5 of those, number 20, 21, 23, 26, and 28, were actually scheduled to be completed in December of 2016. What is the delay on those, and what is the status? What's the new estimated date of completion of those items?
So I will take for the record the actual new estimated completion dates. I do not have that information right at my fingertips. In general, the reason that we have delays from originally scheduled days, twofold. Either we get into the fixing of those recommendations and determine that it was much more difficult or complex than what we anticipated, or the Government Accountability Office has determined that they need to have more details than what we have provided on the initial submission. It's a very much an interactive process with the GAO and the library. What may not be known is that their actual audit was the broadest audit that they've ever done for any organization across the federal government. And so there are many details that have to be worked out, and we have a very ongoing conversation on correcting those issues.
Okay. And of course, our concern is there's been quite a good amount of time that has transpired since March of 2015, even till the completion date that was estimated December 2016. Now we're in June of 2017. And some of those are pretty critical items, such as the ensuring that everyone that has access to the IT system has their required training and documented. So some of those seem pretty important to get done as quickly as possible. Let me transition over to another incident happened at the Madison Data Center when there was an issue. You experienced some system outages, but decision was made not to fall over to the backup facility. Why did you decide not to go to the backup facility in that instance?
So that was actually the week I started the library.
Okay.
So that was a good welcoming package. And as Mr. Hyde noted, I have a very capable deputy who's sitting behind me today, and she was on top of this issue to begin with. Without going into too much detail, there were security-related concerns, which prohibited us from being able to switch over to our alternate computing facility.
Have those security concerns been addressed and resolved?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, we conducted the largest failover exercise this past year, and we took all of the critical systems for the library and failed them over to the alternate computing facility with the security requirements in place, and we were functioning as we should be.
And so the failover was successful. Was there any significant delay in the failover? So if we were to have another incident today, we would be able to fail over to the alternate facility without any disruption of service?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Back in July of last year, coming up on a year, the library had a denial of service attack, which of course disrupted the services and the websites. What's been taken to protect against these denial of service attacks and other related service interruptions?
As you are aware, the cyber threat is constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
We have procured services that allow us to mitigate significant volume of denial of service attack. Without going again into too many details on the security side of things, we are confident that for any significant anticipated type of volume of attack, we have put in place the procedures and the services that allow us to mitigate those concerns.
Okay. Well, time is expiring, and if you could get back with the committee on the new dates on the information security management, the 10 of what those anticipated dates are, it'd be appreciated. So.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank each of you for your testimony. I have a follow-up question, Mr. Barton, if I could ask. how are you establishing actual business requirements and the appropriate level of service needed to meet those requirements? For example, key systems like Congress.gov and copyright customer-facing systems should have very high expectations, while others might need less.
Thank you, sir. As you may or may not be aware, there are standards established by the NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technology, that we follow. And we are really involved with the organization that requires the services. For example, the Copyright Office has their ECHO system that uses for registration, and copyright would be the determining organization as to what is the level of service that's required for their capability. Same with the CRS. So we understand that whenever Congress is in session, CRS has to be functioning. And so we look at each application on a case-by-case basis, and we have essentially a checklist that we go down, and we ask the system owners, do you need this type of capability and response time? So it's a very integrated approach, collaborative with the organization that's providing the capability, and I think it's working out fairly well at this point. We still are dealing with a lot of legacy concerns that we are addressing as quickly as we can. That is an ongoing development effort for us. We do have a service desk where people call and they will open up tickets, and we ask them to evaluate how they're satisfied with the service that they receive. That has always been, at least in my tenure, a fairly positive experience. The vast majority, over 95% of the responses we receive are very positive. So that's one way we measure them. Another way that we are looking at, and we have a service management process that we are implementing for the library. It deals with across the broad spectrum of all IT services, and that will establish service level agreements within our service catalog, which will be automated how we monitor those based on server uptimes, response time to requests for web services, those types of things. So both a combination of asking the recipient of the service and monitoring the automated systems so that we can establish what is our baseline and then improve the performance from the baseline.
Thank you. And in light of that, Ms. Lofton, you have any follow-up questions? All right. I had one last quick question for you, Dr. Hayden, before we stop. How do you recognize employees who go above and beyond? Is there some way that you do that?
The first person that I must say I would recognize immediately would be Mr. Barton, and commend him for the work he has done. During my confirmation hearing, I mentioned Mr. Barton assuring me that technology would not be a problem, and that has been borne out. And so recognition comes, of course, for entire staff in many ways, sometimes actual additional compensation in various forms, but definitely recognition and holding them up. And there are award programs that I participated in where people are recognized. So that's
I'll now recognize Ms. Lofton.
Not a question, just an observation. Obviously, the library is a very big operation. There's hundreds of employees. Morale in the past has been a problem, but I've just had random library employees come up to me and really express great pride and satisfaction in the work they're doing, and I think it's a real credit to your leadership, Dr. Hayden. I wanted to share that with you, and I think the fact that so many employees are happy and full of pride in their work and come up and tell a member of Congress that actually speaks a lot about what you're doing. So thank you for it, and I'll yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. In light of what I think are some good progress and what we're trying to accomplish, I would anticipate we'll revisit this issue maybe early next year, since we have a lot of these recommendations that we're working on, and kind of measure where we are at that point. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witnesses. which we will forward and ask the witnesses to respond as promptly as they can so that their answers may be made a part of the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.